We are Myth Vision, home of Myth Vision podcast and Myth Vision radio group. My co-host is Derek Lambert. I'm Dr. Luther G. Williams. We're on Facebook, so please like us. You'll find us on YouTube, so like and subscribe and share and comment, will you? And whoa, what's that going by? That's our Patreon and our PayPal. So grab them and show us some love, will you? Now, we have discussed on the show extensively mythicism and how myths have been syncretized to have more universal appeal, particularly in the Christian tradition. And one of our very famous listeners found those discussions useful and wanted to say hello to everybody. He's the superhuman mutant from the planetoid Titan. His jeweled glove is more powerful than Michael Jackson's. Please welcome archenemy of the Avengers, Mr. Death himself, Thanos. What's going on, Thanos?
Long, long ago, when the gods created the universe, they fashioned 5 infinity stones. These 5 stones control all aspects, all elements, all forces within the universe. I, Thanos, have obtained 4 of these stones, but the one that is lost, I am looking for, the Stone of Mythology. This stone is the key to all myths, all religions, all beliefs. It is dangerous to know these things, and I, Thanos, am the only one who can have this power.
Whoa, Thanos. Check this out, man. You're going to have to back up, okay? Because I think Phil has the authority and the capability of knowing these things as well. And that is going to be our upcoming guest here that Luther's going to bring in. But I'm going to tell you something. This isn't for everybody to understand and everybody to know. And I'm worried that if it gets in your hands, we might have some trouble. So what do you think about that, Luther?
Yeah, I think you're right, Derek. Thanos, look, man, we're glad our show can help you rule the universe. That's all cool. Let us know how that's working out for you, okay? Our very special guest today is Phil Robinson. He's the host of the show Skeptics with Phil Robinson on YouTube, where the book project Magic Jesus continues. His co-host is familiar to our listeners, Edwin Herbert of Mythos Christos fame. And on the show, Phil does all sorts of neat things, performing music and interviewing guests and doing impressions. He is a self-described long-time promoter of scientific and cultural literacy, as well as the self-appointed Pope of Facebook's Church of Christ Mythicists. Wow, this is going to be an interesting show, folks. Phil, welcome to Myth Vision Podcast. How are you doing?
Thank you, Luther Williams. I'm doing fine. And heavy is the head that wears the Pope hat.
That's only one of your many hats, Phil. Man, we're going to learn all about you in the next hour or so. Well, take us through your journey in discovering mythicism. How'd you become a mythicist?
Well, I was an occultist as a young person. And I had a lot of supernatural beliefs. And so I had read Aleister Crowley and things along that line and kind of New Age stuff. But Crowley seemed to have some understanding of biblical literature that others didn't. He had been a big fan of the Bible as a child. He had been a Plymouth Brethren, but when his father died, he had second thoughts about it. But he remained an occultist, and had that not happened, had he just been a secular sort of person, he would be very famous nowadays. But instead, he included a lot of superstition with what he wrote, and therefore you had to really parse it out. But when it came to explaining the Bible, nobody was better. Okay, he could see the story underlying the story. He would often know the mythology. And in all my studies, I've only proven a very few things that he believed wrong. And the rest have turned out to be just gold as far as digging out the subtext. He understood the meanings of the carefully crafted metaphorical names that they provide for characters. These metonyms are something that they work on. I mean, they take their time. They would have taken weeks making a single name, perhaps, just to get it just what they wanted exactly. So it would work cross-culturally often. is what I'm saying. You could be a Greek or you could be a Jew, and you could be understanding the metonyms reference in your own culture.
Phil, that's amazing. So is there still a lot of Crowley left to be mined since you started this work? Does that suggest future research?
Yes. That being said, I've been able to write a chapter on the water, the serpent wisdom being transported by water, and how this shapes ancestral law. And I want to talk about that with you. Here's what essentially happens in Genesis: is Abraham takes Lot, who is his nephew, and he takes him. Abraham was born on Euphrates, so Abraham is Euphrates. Lot is the name Lotan, and it has to do with the Latani River and the Phoenician water god Lotan. Okay, and this is Levitani to the Jews. Latani is Levitani, and the root word underneath that is lutes. It means white. And so this is Team White. And he comes down with Lot, and he's got Levi on the side, and they got Uncle Laban of the white country, and Levi, the connector, to show that water connects everything. And all the water is part of the net of Poseidon. Okay, now what they do in the Bible is they counterpose the net of Poseidon with the forge of Hephaestus to make fire and water action, which has a magical quality to it. And it's all poetic illusion is what it really is. It's just poetic allegories is what they're doing. But some of them are quite beautiful. When you think about water, okay, you can't live without it. Then you think about fire. That's the red. You got the white and the red. You think about the orange red of fire, but nothing lives in it. Okay, that being said, if the earth weren't warmed, we would die. Okay, so it's not that fire is inherently good or it's bad. It's whether you have too much or too little of it, and the same way with water. And so they use the water to kill everybody with, and yet it's the source of all life. But here's where the water gets really cool, is the baptismal font is a virgin that continually gives birth to new Christians. Okay, it's Pandora, essentially. So what I'm saying is when you have the water ritual, you experience the baptism, you are going through a birth, but you are effectively born of a virgin. You weren't born of a woman.
Hold on. Time out. Thanos, get out of here, dude. Okay, get out of here, Thanos. You aren't grabbing this from us. This is good. Okay, so this is that born again concept. So do you think, and I'm just throwing this out there because I'm like setting my questions aside at this point because I love this already. Do you think that this has to do with the mother goddess concept that kind of has been, or as some people say, the Old Testament has been edited out? You know, they took away the mother goddess figure, Asherah, and so forth. Does this tie into, is the New Testament trying to give hints to the divine feminine through baptismal reference as a virgin?
Yes, and here's what makes the reference a little bit complicated, is the moon, Venus, and Earth are the three girls. Okay, if you look into Greek mythology, this is Hera and Aphrodite and Selene or whomever you're going to, Artemis as the moon goddess, actually. Okay, so the moon is the one that's all about birthing, and this is where the river guys see the water, the pure water is like liquid light. The two lower elements vie against the higher elements, which are fiery and air. Okay, but the lower elements are earth and water is like the light of the earth elements because it's the clear, pure thing. So with John, like when, regardless who's being baptized, there's an idea of purification involved in it, but of also a renewal and a rebirth that many say is the virgin birth. That's what the virgin birth is really talking about, is that rebirth that occurs in you.
Luther,
Okay. Hey, Derek. Looks like we're in it already, right? How did we get here?
Yeah, real fast.
Yeah, really fast, Phil. Okay, look, man, check it out. The beginning of the New Testament, or close to the beginning of it, the book of Acts, the Holy Spirit manifested as fire. In the course of the epistles, Paul makes this statement that the church is washed with pure water. There's the element of water. There's the expectation later in 1 Thessalonians that the church would be caught up in the air. And then finally, John in Revelation sees the New Jerusalem coming down to earth as a bride adorned for its husband. All four elements going on there, but in this order: fire, water, air, earth, which is exactly the reverse of the zodiacal order, because here we're talking about consciousness, and consciousness works a little bit differently than does material. What is going on with being caught up in the air? You're talking about all these elements. What do you see in Thessalonians?
Oh, okay, that's not one I'm very good with. I haven't gotten to air yet. I'm still on fire, and I'm still kind of studying water, though I've got a good grasp of that, and I can explain how these basically Lot settles into the Jordan Valley. This is the key. Okay, Abraham is talking a lot. He says, well, if you go to the left, I will go to the right. If you go to the right, I will go to the left. Lot looks at the Jordan Valley and he sees it's well watered, and he says, okay, I'm going to lay down in this. You see, I'm going to settle down into this. He's a river settling down. So he's taken the Levite tradition and brought it from the Levitani River to Jordan, and this is what gives John his spiritual validation. Okay, is because Jordan is also the boundary of the promised land.
Okay, this is awesome. I've never heard anything quite like this, and so I think I'm gonna have. It's probably gonna be one of the better shows. Luther knows I'm not kidding. Wow. Let me sidetrack you for a second, just to try to bounce back. So you are, or Luther and me, we're familiar with the Church of Christ scholars and preterism. Okay, is there really a group of Church of Christ mythicists? Is there a group like that, or is this just a funny label?
It was a very low maintenance organization. It's basically a page that sits there unless I put something on it.
Oh, okay.
And occasionally I get a comment, but usually not.
Luther, you mind if I tag that in with an additional to kind of touch on John a little and kind of?
Yeah. Go ahead. Take it somewhere, Derek.
Okay. Well, he took it there. Well, shoot, I'm skipping ahead of you. So we're talking about John the Baptist, right? So Levi. Now, does this Levi? Two questions in one. Does this Levi connect to Leviathan? And by the way, being a water serpent, by the way, you were just talking about. And then does this Levi that connects to John the Baptist? Is this really a guy, or what is John the Baptist? So I know that's two big questions.
John is an allegorical character, okay, and Levi means connector. And this is speaking right to the connectivity of water, connecting all life on the planet. You can't live without it. It's like a demigod that you never really get rid of. And so what it does is when you start using it instrumentally, you get the Hydra myths. You've tapped off the water thousands of times to make a city. Okay, and this has been a wrestling or struggling with the water, because that's the essence of mythology, is epic and eptic. And epic is struggle and eptic is love. Okay, a kind of essentially love and war opposition. Okay, so with John, you've got a person who is carrying on the tradition of actually what the Hindus call the yoni, and it is the birth canal, okay? And so that is the image that the baptism is this place of renewal and rebirth.
I might as well be a heretic and devil's advocate when I say many scholars will go, well, dude, we know John the Baptist existed. Or at least Richard Carrier said on our program there's a 50-50 chance that he existed statistically, according to... So he's saying 50% chance he didn't, 50% chance he did. Can you tell us why he didn't, and he's more an allegory than a real historical character? Maybe just a little bit on that?
Well, 97% of statistics are made up on the spot. Okay, that's part of the problem. They're just pulled out of thin air. Okay. The other things is there are some things you can't apply Bayesian reasoning to very well. Okay, so the idea that John may be historical, yeah, he may be. There may have been a John that's recorded in Josephus, but I would need further evidence for that, because that John in Josephus, he sounds like a Jewish person who would just be doing a mikvah bath cleansing type ritual and wouldn't be forgiving anybody's sins. In fact, that's not mentioned in the Josephine document. This isn't rebirth, spiritual rebirth. The Jewish mikvah bath is what you do when you're already in a state of righteousness.
Right. The mikvah bath is one of the three distinguishing marks of Judaism. I had a rabbi share that with me, the others being the Sabbath and circumcision. So you've got...
my favorite subject right there.
You got to be kidding me. Circumcision?
Oh, you should have seen me discussing it with Dr. Carrier.
Well, go ahead. Give us some insights. Give us some insights, Phil. In the
okay,
circumcision.
it's a birth as well. Okay, and this is a man who undergoes this is putting himself in the woman's place. Okay, and so this is represented by a spiritual birth. Where it was practiced in Egypt, they considered it a sign of spiritual development, and so it was probably a coming of age ritual originally. In other words, it was associated with puberty, and that's where you get the original sin in the Bible anyway, is Adam and Eve in the garden discovering where people really come from as teenagers.
Children, cover your ears.
All of a sudden, this became an R-rated show, Derek. We got to do something about this.
Before we go on, though, Luther, because I want you to ask another question. I kind of hit too many questions in a row here. Subscribe to his YouTube channel. It's coming across your screen right here, as you can see. This is Phil's YouTube channel. Please show him some love. Go like, subscribe. This guy is full of information, brilliant guy, and he's got so much to share with us. So go show him some love, why don't you? All right, Luther.
John the Baptist, this mythical aspect of John, and I agree with you 100%. But I look at it from the names, the metonymy, I think that's how you pronounce it. Wait, am I close? How do you pronounce that word, Phil? Phil, are you there?
That's exactly how I say it. Thank you, sir.
Good. Okay, right. So I'm looking at that. I'm looking at the study of names, onomatology, and how John's name was prearranged. You had an angel beforehand who appeared to his father and said, "You're not going to name him Seymour. You're not going to name him Zechariah after you. You're going to name him John." Now, when that happened, a lot of things came into alignment, one of which is the numerical value of the name John. Because now, and which happens to be 1,380, which is the same as the numerical value of the name Herod, who killed John. And you wouldn't have the same numerical value if he were named anything except John. So it's almost as if he had to be named John by prearrangement. And those kinds of things are so, what shall we say, they're so planned that it does smack of mythicism to me. It does not seem natural. How do you choose these things? How do you select these facts out for a historical person? It doesn't seem to make sense.
Yes, that's why I'm saying they really work on these metonyms. These are not just simple things that they throw together, they come up with off the top of their head. Not at all. You take Jonah, okay, that's the precursor to John, and it is Iona, which is on Turkey with Asia Minor, which that's where Paul is. Okay, that's where Paul is, 7 churches that he writes letters to. are on Asia Minor. This is Turkey now in modern times, but it was Anatolia then, and the Hittites influenced the religion of both the Canaanites, which included the Jews, and the Greeks. Okay, so they both essentially Zeus. You can trace Zeus to Anatolia, and you can trace Yahweh there too, effectively.
This is amazing, and since I've encountered you, you've done a really good job of showing how there's syncretism and how these myths come from previous myths, and they all connect in so many ways. Can
I say one thing?
Yes, sir.
Think of the word yawn. Okay, now think of the word yawn. What do you do with your mouth? You open your mouth, right? Okay, now think of the word yone. Yone as the birth canal. Again, it's the opening, you see. And so this is the root of this, and it's going back to Sanskrit, which Sanskrit is Proto-Indo-European, was what preceded Sanskrit, and that everybody speaks all over Asia before there was even history. Before history was even thought of, everybody's language had Proto-Indo-European in it.
Okay, you opened up something. Okay, Yone, Yonah, meaning dove in Hebrew. So here we are back to Jonah again.
Correct. Iona is the dove, and Jonah is the dove. Yes, sir. That's correct. And this is the Holy Spirit.
Okay.
Oh no,
okay. Wait a minute.
Kidding?
The Holy Spirit, by which one is born again, right? By which Phil.
Look, Jesus is born from John. Okay, that's Jesus ben Ananias. That's Jesus, the son of John. So he's spiritually born from church father John. Okay, this is the male birth. It's actually a virgin birth because males can't give birth. Okay, but John stands in the place of the Father. He runs the baptism. He dunks Jesus. When he says he can't take the sandal strap off of Jesus, he's not worthy to do that. That's because that would remove the animal hide from him, and he would be ready. That would be an act of spiritual cleansing. So when Jesus comes to John, John says, you should be baptizing me. I can't baptize you to him.
This is beautiful. So one more thing to go deeper into that. the dove, isn't this also a constellation? Not only are we talking about a dove, but isn't this astrologically significant as well?
It is the planet Venus, and so it becomes Hellel, who I have as Lazarus, but that's in my world. Hellel is Lazarus.
The Luther go.
Hallel, this Hebrew word meaning to shine, as in the word hallelujah. Hallel, Venus being the bright morning star, the shining planet. So now all of a sudden, what is it that shines? Is it a person, or is it a dead piece of land up there? Venus. I mean, look at the connection. What do you think?
Well, she's also Mary Magdalene. See, Mary Magdalene is the older version, and she's thought to be a prostitute by people, okay? Because this is Shamhat. If you read the Epic of Gilgamesh, this is the girl from the Temple of Ishtar. Okay, they called the planet Venus Ishtar. Greeks call it Aphrodite. Romans call it Venus. It's all the same gal. Okay, now, and the Jews, they, of course, have to have a male. So they have Hallel, and they have Lazarus in the New Testament as Christians.
Hey, Derek, you're still muted. Where are you?
I said, Phil, you're dangerous, man. You're dangerous, bro. Luther, you had a good question here. I'm going to go ahead and steal your question, brother. And number 3, man, this is good. We often discuss the Christ myth theory, that the concept of Jesus comes from the Old Testament allegories. pagan mystery schools and cults, Greek mythology and philosophy, and even Roman propaganda that in itself can be really tough pill to swallow, but you argue that many mythicists do not go far enough. Where do they go wrong?
Okay, they preclude the allegorical method. And the reason they preclude the allegorical method largely is because they have to leave the surface level meaning. And once you do, you are never going to prove something that was not said. This is the problem. If it was inferred, you either caught the gist or you didn't. Okay? And there's no proving it. Either you get the joke or you don't get the joke. That's how they operated this.
I could see that.
Okay, well, I love that. Wait a minute. You're saying that the text was embedded with jokes, with inside material, jokes that they understood that we just don't get. Is that right?
I'm saying that if you told the fourth level initiate, if you took a guy who just showed up at the door and you told him the things that a fourth level initiate is told, he would look at you and call you a liar and walk away. Okay, and they intentionally made it that way so that if you've ever tried to repeat what's in the Bible, you quickly learn that it's very easily to get that story wrong and to get details wrong, but that's because of the way it's written. It's written to be all over the place. It's written to be madcap in some ways.
So technically, I'm not, I guess you'd say where I've been going in my personal journey. Of course, we're interviewing you, but I want your thoughts about where I'm at, because in my personal journey in this research, I've been beginning to tell Luther, like, hey, dude, it seems to me that the kind of Masonic rituals and stuff that we see with secret society stuff that we see, like the chief cornerstone and these ritual concepts of death and rebirth and, even being buried for 3 days and 3 nights, there are Masonic rituals of that and their tradition and all that. But it's fair to say that I'm on the right path in suggesting that this was a secret society of mystery school people who clearly did not want the public to know their initiatory rituals, but they're in these texts. You just have to know what you're looking at, and if you don't get the joke, because you really are not reading what's really going on.
Bingo. Bingo, spot on, as they say in Britain. You're spot on, mate. They're like, you're spot on.
There you go. Hey, that's awesome, man. I feel like I've been feeling that's the path I've been heading down, and not before even meeting you. This is something I've been coming across going, dude, this,
okay, and guess what? It goes all the way back. It goes all the way back to Gilgamesh, okay? It goes all the way back to 2000 BCE. The texts are all written the same way. They're playing a game with you, and once you figure out the rules, and you're really hard to do, trust me, I've spent 5 years trying to figure out this stuff. And I'm only now remembering some of what I read 30 years ago. And so that's how I'm doing it. But basically, see, the moon drops dew on the earth. And so it deposits water. And that's the most pure water you're ever going to find, is that morning dew. And so it's seen as this birth goddess figure in everybody's religion, except in the Hebrew, it's Miriam's well, essentially. It on one level, it's again, it was typically a divine feminine issue. But check this out. Yahweh was probably a moon god, or Nun, what they use. Here's what it was. Gilgamesh's mom is Wild Cow Ninsun. She becomes Nana Suen, which is the male god of the moon worshipped by the Bedouin Hebrews, which is the true Hebrew. That's the old tradition. Okay, and this becomes Nun, and Joshua is the son of Nun. You see, so this is where Jesus comes then, being born from the moon. That's the image of the pool of water, and this reflects the desert oasis. You see, and what would you find but a tree at the oasis? That would be Asherah. Okay, that would be the Asherah pole. This is old Hebrew religion. Its elements are still in there. In a way, they've just been retold.
And who would you find in the pool but a fish? Nun means fish, Joshua.
Well, yeah, or you would find a serpent, as Gilgamesh does. When he gets in the pool in the Epic of Gilgamesh, the serpent steals the fruit of immortality, effectively, or becoming young again, of renewing life. This is the serpent wisdom. You see, the serpent sheds its skin and is reborn again by that metaphor.
So look at the proliferation of wisdom, and there are many, many more connections to this, and Derek knows about that. I'm sure you're familiar with it too. The numerical value of Nun, which is Joshua's father, which means fish.
Yes.
Okay, the numerical value of that is 153. Does 153 fish sound familiar to anybody?
Yes.
John chapter 20, 153 great fish that Peter caught. Joshua, the son of the fish, Nun, Mr. 153. Ties in.
If you don't mind me adding, Phil, because what you said about this whole this play, these jokes, this inside, if you will, best way I could put it is blueprint. All right, the way that they built this purposefully makes perfect sense, and this is why I thought it had Masonic ritual significance in temple construction, which might go back to who knows when some of these pyramids were built in other continents and whatnot, and who knows how far back into prehistory some of the stuff probably does go. But I say all that to say that what we found in Gilgamesh, we had a gentleman on the show that was doing sacred geometry, and he showed that the same numerical calculations that you find in like Revelation, where he talks about the New Jerusalem being 144,000 cubits and this and that, the face value squared in the cube that was in the ark that was built in the Epic of Gilgamesh is the same calculation. It's almost like they're not only doing play on words in the writing, but in their ritual construction, in their craft, in what they did, from measurement to math to language to music, you name it. It probably encompassed everything. I'm just throwing it out there. I didn't know if you might have been aware of some of that.
Well, no, that's, I mean, it's actually related to obsessive compulsion is what it's related. You'll find the leaving and entering of spaces, sacred spaces, involves a ritual, and getting things perfect, just the right number, and that sort of thing is often a much about ritual. And so you had even Martin Luther saying that people needed to, it wasn't Martin Luther, it was the Catholic guy who founded the Society of Jesus, Loyola. And he said you had to watch priests because some of them would have OCD, and they would do the rituals just for their own benefit and would do them in an obsessive way. And he didn't like that. He didn't think that that's what they were meant to be. That being said, they still like the rituals to be done correctly. Okay, so it's just that aspect.
And admittedly, Phil, I've got some of that in me too, because when I really get going on this, I want to embed inside jokes like that. I say, boy, why can't I write something like that? Boy, that's just so brilliant on so many levels. But there's something I've thought about long and hard, and that is you can't get the inside jokes unless you translate the proper names. Every time we say a proper name and do not know its meaning, we risk losing the joke. For example, you say Jerusalem. In our culture, we say the word Jerusalem. What good is that unless you know it means our peace, our possession of peace? Otherwise, because in that culture, when they heard Jerusalem, they didn't hear Jerusalem. They heard our possession of peace. Therefore, one of the great projects that I have in mind is to publish an edition of the Bible where all the proper names are translated. At least then you got a running chance at getting the jokes.
That would be awesome, and I appreciate that line of inquiry, and this is part of why I'm here today. Okay, is I want people like yourself to say, "Hey, I'm going to take a crack at this. I'm going to see how it comes out." And if some of what I'm saying makes sense to you, I'd like to get into the fire spirits actually and talk about those because they're fascinating. You get into Hephaestus. You've got a Jewish Hephaestus in Tubal-Cain. Okay, Tubal-Cain. Now think of the word Vulcan, the god of the forge, of the Roman god of the forge. Tubal-Cain. Okay, it's literally the same words. Also, the cane is the spear, you see, and it's this forge that creates the weapons of war, and they are made of iron, and the Romans are very, very much about iron. And Mars is their god. He is their father. Mars is the father of Romulus, therefore he is the father of the Romans. That's their identity.
Phil, maybe I shouldn't expose this under penalty of getting hurt or whatever, but I'm going to tell you something. A Freemason shared with me that if you're ever in a life or death situation and you're about to be killed, that if you say the word Tubal-Cain and there's a Mason present, the death will not take place. What is this mysticism about Tubal-Cain?
Okay, well, this comes out in Jubal, Jabal, and Tubal-Cain, and these are the three versions that they've spun off the Phoenician blacksmith god who is named Jibal. Okay, in other words, he colored our text. And so the Greeks have Hephaestus, Romans have Vulcan, the Jews have Jibal. Okay, they don't say his name because you can't do that because they're monotheistic now and they can't have angels and demigods and stuff. So they turn him into a hero character and he's Tubal-Cain. Okay, or he helps make up part of Jesus and what he does. Or Moses, for instance, he takes the rod and he drops it on the ground and it turns into a serpent. Okay, this is the power of the forge to melt the iron and make it pliable. Or if it was copper, whichever. Okay, and what you're going to find is when you get back to Venus for a second there, she was all about copper. She's Aphrodite washed up on Cyprus, which means Kupros, which means copper, and was the big center of copper smelting throughout the Bronze Age. Okay, they have this cultural memory. In fact, the Phoenicians, most definitely, that's who controlled it, kind of back there. She's a form of Ishtar, also, by the way. This doesn't change. She's kind of always the same girl when she comes back. So I'm just saying there's two types of fire. There's the love fire and then there's the destruction fire. And the Romans see Mars as a balance of it. They don't see him like the Greeks saw Ares. See, Ares was a hated god, but even by Zeus, hated his son Ares, okay? And the Greeks hated Ares. The Romans are not that way with Mars. They see Mars as a protective God and that sort of thing, and that's why they think they are able to conquer all of these people, is because they have Mars on their side and they call him God. Okay, they don't mince words. He's their God. I mean, Zeus is there, but nobody worships Zeus. Okay, he's like the federal god. He's like granddad's lord or whatever.
Look, Phil, on that note, are you talking now when you're, of course, some of this stuff obviously I've seen in the Greeks that pattern into the Romans, and they're 12 Olympian deities and such that obviously are easily seen as syncretism, that they copied them and so forth. But is some of this language that you're speaking as you're speaking to us now somewhat that coded language of how you're seeing this god as this and this person
yes
that? Okay.
Yes. Okay. For instance, Cain means spear. Again, let's get back to the metonym because Cain is a metonym. It also means blacksmith, or it's associated with that word, Cana. And so when you have the wedding at Cana, you are mixing the water and wine, but you might as easily see those as copper and tin forming bronze or something of that nature, and how the fiery and the watery elements are coming together. And I'm sorry to lose you there, but they're complex characters. Here's what happens. There's a theory of myth. I've been through a lot of them. One of them is that myth is about the resolution of opposites, of oppositions. In other words, you got hot and cold, male and female, strong and weak. And what it turns out is that all of these qualities are actually dualistic, kind of within themselves. But like I was saying with heat, it's really one thing when we're talking about heat, but we mean either bad heat or good heat. Good heat is enough heat. Bad heat is either too much or too little heat. You see what I'm saying? So you have to kind of resolve some of the symbolism, accept the fact that they are dualistic, but they tend to use the same aspect over and over again. So what I'm saying with Aphrodite, you can see her as destructive or creative, but she is inherently creative because she is the young goddess becoming a woman. She is of marriageable age. And that's what it is with the three planets. Venus is the girl who's of marriageable age. The moon is the girl who is a bride, and so that is the bride. And then the old earth is the old earth mother. She's always been there. You see, but she's all of these gals. It's just different stages of her life that she is those three. So you may be looking at the three fates or the three furries, which are female. Okay, I mean, you could be looking at that if you wanted to look at it that way.
Let's go back for a moment with this idea of the resolution of opposites, because you mentioned the wedding at Cana and the turning of the water into wine, the miracle of Jesus, actually the first miracle recorded in the Gospel of John, which is significant in and of itself. So you've got the water, but then you've also got, people call liquor fire water. So,
right.
So you've got the effervescence of the wine. And an interesting thing is the region in Palestine that probably the most famous region for wine was Gath Haifer, which is where Jonah came from. And so Jonah, who's the dove, is the effervescent one. He's the one that flies, and he supervises the changing of the water to wine. Well, what do you have at Jesus's baptism? You have the dove again. The water is there, and the Holy Spirit is there, so the joy of the wine is there. These symbols come back over and over again.
Okay, the reason the water is being added, according to Jewish tradition, is to preserve you're adding the wine to the water to preserve the water. In other words, water would go bad because it would have a bacteria in it, simply. Okay, so to avoid that, you would mix some water with it. At least that's the explanation. I don't know that that's literally true, but that's the explanation given for it. So preservation is what you do. This comes at the autumn equinox. This is when Sukkoth is approaching the autumn equinox, and so it's the time for the storing up of grain. It's the time for preserving the family through the winter that you're thinking about. So you separate the seed from the chaff. The chaff gets burned or thrown away. Okay, this is the time. The person dies to their single life and they become married. And that's what it represents. It represents the taking of the bride.
Autumn equinox, yes. And the autumn equinox is the grape harvest. So here we are in the sign of Libra. In the autumn, grapes were harvested last, along with olives. Makes perfect sense.
All right, yeah, that's fine. So see, the Hebrew religion has two high holy days. It has two heads of the year, and the first is spring equinox. The second is autumn equinox. Essentially, one is the spring equinox is the beginning of the ecclesiastical year, the church year. And the autumn equinox is the beginning of the civil year, or as they would, this is the royal marriage, because civil government typically was royalty. Okay, and so this was called the royal marriage, and this is a time for perhaps, well, the putting on of a purple coat before one perishes as a free man.
So here we are again, right back at
And the
the
purple
ritual.
coat, let me explain that. That's the flayed animal. Okay, the feast you're at, that purple coat, this is the animal whose skin has been removed. And if you look in, Alwell mentions it, that a woman named Mary inside the gates of surrounded Jerusalem, which has had a wall built around it by the Romans, eats her child, flays and eats her child. And this is called the Eon or Aries or whatever. This is what it is. And so this is the lamb. Okay, and this is where you're at. That's what they're using it for, the sign of Aries. Yeah.
Hey, look out, Derek. Talking about the death of a free man with marriage, man. Look out there.
Look, this is this is cool, man. This is cool because it really takes a lot of things that people divide and separate and says, no. They can all belong together in harmony. So you don't have to separate and say this isn't that. No, it has to be this. I love this. I don't want to steal your thunder, Luther. Talk about Paul, man. We got to talk about our boy Paul, because for crying out loud, he's responsible for, or if he's a he, is responsible for most of the epistles in the New Testament, right? I mean, let's get into him. What do you think?
Okay, you're asking me, sir?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I have long seen him as the protege of Hermes. If you look in the Greek myths, whether it's the Iliad or the Odyssey, for instance, the demigods are coming, or the gods of Olympus are coming down, and they're helping the heroes in the Odyssey. Okay, Odysseus gets helped by Athena at one stage. He gets helped by Hermes at another stage. But Paul is the agent of Hermes. Paul is the guy who crosses all of the boundaries. Okay, he used to be a Roman, but he's a Roman, he's a Jew. He used to persecute the Christians, now he promotes them. He crosses every boundary because he is the god of boundaries. So he basically takes on the characteristics of the god. If you look at Achilles, he is Apollo's man, okay, because he can't be anybody else's man. I believe Hector is Ares' man, if I'm not mistaken, and he's the one that's killed like Jesus and dragged around Troy 3 times. That's the ritual death. That's the 3 days the moon is dark every month. That's the 3 days in the cave. So when Peter is standing in Jesus's way, he is the stone, the round stone that Mark says is on the door of the cave, and that is the moon. That's the stone. That's why he's Cephas, the rock. Okay, is because he is the moon in that regard. But he has a bit of a dual identity also.
Get it, Luther, get it.
Hey, Derek, I wouldn't know how to follow that, but let's step back for a moment. Okay.
His other meaning is father. Peter is pater. Okay,
yes.
He's Father Moon is Nana Suen, is Nun, and is the father of Joshua. Thank you.
That's amazing. The father of Joshua. The father of Yahweh is salvation.
Yep.
Okay. These are connections that never occurred to me before.
Joshua is Yeshua. John
Yes.
the Baptist is the church father of Jesus, just as Joshua, son of Nun, was the son of the moon, effectively, is what it's saying. And it is seen as a fish. Yes, it's the silver fish. When they send the apostle out to go, or the disciple to go get a coin out of a fish's mouth, he pulls the fish out of the stream, and it's got a gold coin in its mouth. That's just the sun emerging from winter, which is the lunar season when the moon dominates the sky. And so this all comes back to the contest between the orbs, between the sun and the moon, just like when Jacob is wrestling Esau. Esau is the sun, Jacob is the moon, but Esau holds his own, or Jacob holds his own, and actually kind of triumphs. but these are initiations. So that's what an initiation ritual looks like. Okay, when it's put in allegorical form.
Oh, okay, so Phil, with the richness of layer upon layer of myth, what do you do if you peel back the onion enough and there's no history, dude? You have gotten so far away from the idea of historicity. There doesn't seem to be anything left. What do you make of that? What do you do with that? Is that a problem for you?
No, magic always was naughty, meaning it comes down to nothing, to naught. In the end, it never existed. It was a misconception. So that's what the whole big story is.
Dude, you are a heavy hitter, man. This is awesome. Have you ever have you found characters or subjects in the scriptures that seem to be historical?
Yeah, I hold that Pilate is historical, but he's not who they say he is, and that's going to be the one answer I'm only going to give privately to people. I will not put out. People will have to buy my book to find out who Pontius Pilate really is.
There's your plug. Do you have is your book already out?
Okay, no, it doesn't exist. I've got some chapters kind of that need a lot of work, okay. And so it was originally called Magic Jesus and the Wizards of God because the blacksmiths and that sort of thought they were believed to be wizards way back in the Bronze Age and that sort of stuff. Okay, there was no such word as scientist. Okay, so between the natural philosopher and the wizard, it could be the same person. It's not really a big difference, but people did have magical beliefs and stuff back in the day. Lots of them, more than we have now, if you can imagine it.
So Phil, I'm as excited as Derek is, I'm sure, about this book. What needs to happen to bring it to fruition? Is it going to be in book form, or are you going to have it in part on a Patreon where subscribers can have access to it? Or, I mean, what's going on with the information? How do you want to package it? How's it going to be handled?
Okay. I'm going to be seeking help from a community at some time in the future that wants to support this. But I suggest we speak about that off camera, and that way no one will get egg on their face. But I'm not good at business-like thinking. Okay, I can't do any of that stuff like regular folks do, where they get down and they do the math and they do the paperwork and it's all nice. And okay, I have zero of those skills. You can hardly get me to sit still in a chair. That's what the problem is. So, I'm just not cut out for that sort of organization, sir.
I know exactly what you mean. I'm the same way. I'd much rather be doing the actual work of discovery than all of the administrative things that kind of go along with it. So let's talk about the literary genres of the gospel, particularly the Gospel of Mark. Earl Doherty, famous mythicist, in his book, Jesus Christ, Neither God Nor Man, talks about the possible Alexandrian origin of the Gospel of Mark. And he discusses three levels of Mark's writings. First, the Gospel of Mark, which we have, which is the precursor, the elemental text that gave rise to Matthew and Luke. And then there's this text called the Secret Gospel of Mark, which is more esoteric in nature. And then beyond that, supposedly, at least this particular author theorizes, the one Doherty talks about, that there was an oral tradition, a mystery school tradition that Mark couldn't even write about, that takes it to a third level. What do you think about that? And how much of this esoteric information is encoded in the Gospel of Mark that we have?
Okay, I think that is something like true. In other words, you've said a number of things, and that I think there's a general truth to what Doherty thinks. Okay, and he's not the only one thinking this. You have Atwell saying that he is using typological matches, and you have David Oliver Smith, who is doing something very similar, and you have myself doing something similar, and so it's like there's a lot of this reading between the lines more than reading the lines. You see, you have to learn to to do that. And yeah, it could go really deep, and in fact I suspect it does, but I can't prove that, so I don't know what to say about it.
And again, in Richard Carrier mentioned a book to me, which I then followed up on. I had a chance to read by John Dominic Crossan, called The Power of Parable, and it talks about Mark as an extended parable, which also fits into this tradition.
I suggest we listen to Philo Judaeus. Philo Judaeus read nothing in the Hebrew Bible literally. He called it all allegory. Said that was the only way it could be understood. Okay, I'm just the sad truth that certain scholars don't want to face. That's all I am. And what everybody hated Crowley anyway, so he didn't care. He didn't care if the scholars ever acknowledged him.
I like that about you, and I'm glad there's people like you out there, and it's not everybody's the same. I mean, that's what you're here for. That's what the community needs, is more regular folks and less experts. Yeah, because everybody's trained to be aligned, and I get it. I really do. Something I wanted to ask you, because we talked about Paul being a mythological character. So it's fair to say not only is the Old Testament full of this allegory and is not to be historically literal, not saying there aren't elements that may be there that have some bone to them. The New Testament should be treated very similarly, but I wanted your thoughts on the Pauline letters. Okay, did we get the dating, now I say did we, scholarship, did we get the dating of Paul's letters correct? And I'm not talking about conservative scholars that are believers. I'm talking the ones who say, hey, look, Paul probably wrote these prior to the destruction of Jerusalem temple, the ones that are actually Paul, and the others, may have been manufactured after the fact. Is the dating correct, or what have you found in it that are some problems, if you will?
Well, if the dating was correct, I'm saying it probably came from Dionysus cult and had Dionysus's name or something in there, or some other cult. Could have come from Bologna cult. It could have come from Bendix cult. It could. You could go on and on. They had a lot of these lesser cults that we just don't know about anymore, but they were structured quite similarly to what the Christian became. The difference between Dionysus and Christian cult, who even knows? Was there really a big difference? So you've got a resurrecting gods in them, or ideally you've got, heck, Dionysus, they were already arguing about whether he was docetic, whether he was a phantom, or whether he was a real god, or was he a historical human being? Because there were those who always said, oh, Dionysus isn't a god. Dionysus is just a man who pretends to be a god. You see? So there you go.
You got me wanting to ask some more, if you don't mind, Luther. This is really important because, so technically, where Jesus has been shoved into the story, you're saying could have easily have been Dionysus, and they edited this into the text.
If it was, how would you prove it wasn't? Okay,
right.
I'm just saying, if that's all they did, and they did a cut and paste, how would you prove it wasn't? In fact, there are certain documents that looks like there was some difference with the names in the Paulines, that maybe the name for Jesus, I think Mike Lawrence has come up with something like that. I think he's one person who rejects my ideas. But whatever, but that's okay.
Right, that's fine, absolutely fine.
That's what makes a horse race. Everybody's got different methods, okay? We're all coming at this from somewhat of a different angle, and so we're going to have to be tolerant of different methodology. But I'm just not listening to what I call the academy anymore. I don't care what they think. Price is the only person who really stands out from the academy, who can understand me when I talk, because when I talk to the other guys, they've read Zilch Homer, they don't know the Greek myths. Epic of Gilgamesh. Why would I want to listen to that? Okay, and they stand there and they accuse me of parallelomania. Okay, I have best-selling authors do this to me. Okay, and it just really bothers me. Okay, because I'm tired of that whole crowd, and I'm just going to say, you know what? You've never proved your points. Your theories don't actually work. Your theories are no better than anybody, and they came entirely from the surface level Pentecostal reading of the text.
Now,
Please.
Yeah, Phil. Here, one more thing, since you mentioned the beautiful name, the Messiah, Dr. Bob. One more thing I want to ask on that: Marcion and Paul. What are your thoughts about that? Because you have an idea of Dionysus, but what do you? I know you probably know all about it. What are your thoughts about Bob's thinking about Marcion and Paul?
Okay. I didn't read all of that book. I read the first 200 pages, and I was enlightened by that. Okay, but I wasn't going to go on with 400 more pages of maybe Paul is Simon Magus or whatever. Okay, I've come to believe that Paul is Simon Magus. In the crucifixion, he's taking the cross, and that is becoming the staff of Hermes. Okay, and that's what he hands back to Jesus. It's got essentially Venus and Mars hanging from it as Rufus and Alexander. Now, when you get into the metonym of Alexander, you're going to find out that these names go all the way back to the ancient Hindu, even maybe. They go back so far in the Middle East, they go back to the beginning of Babylon or the beginning of Sumer. You've got this kind of El Shaddai type god figure that's just hugely ancient, and it could have been all over the world. He's like the King of Kings, God of gods, and the only God that ever was. But here's the thing: when the ancients could see a god as 5 different things simultaneously, they had no problem with that. Oh, Ea, okay, he's a giant water serpent when he's not the lord of the city or whatever, but he's all of those things. He could be a human. He could have he could have an animal form, which he does. Okay, and so it could be a serpent, or it could be a grazing animal. It could be Enkidu. Could be John the Baptist. You see, because he's a water river. He's of that river tradition of ancestral law. The fire gods are doing the revealed law. Paul's traveling the plains of the heavens and all of that. The fire gods bring the revealed law, while the water gods, who are just heroes in the story, are giving you the ancestral law, which has to do with tribe and with cultus, with what you get from your folks, with whatever they passed on to you. Okay, that doesn't have to do with whatever religious moment is popular in your day. That's more coming from the sky gods. Now, when you take your sky gods, and they're living way off out in the world, you end up having to demonize the local water gods, because the water spirits are considered lower element animals. And so you have Yahweh cursing the serpent in the garden. He turns him into a river. He says, on your belly you will go and eat the dust of the ground. That's what the river does. Okay, he's using that's an allegory for a river that's going to go spread fertility throughout the land. The ancients knew that the crop was in the river. They could make that connection. They knew that when the stuff rotted on the land, the dead bodies of the plants rotted all over the land, it ran into the water. This is the cup of the blood of the saints. You see, the blood of all living is what Babylon, Lady Babylon, drinks. She's just Mother Earth. Mother Earth gets all the blood in all the sacrifices. That's what she gets, whether it's the blood of plants or whatever. They see the sap as like the blood of plants. They're totally into these things. Oh no, they do great stories on that alone. Just the essences, like myrrh. That's where Mars and Mary came from. They came from that bitter water myrrh person, who is simply an androgynous primordial god. Whether you call him Leviathan or you call him Hydra, he's the same thing. Or you call it Tiamat or Asherah. It's the sea, and the sea is the moon. So this is why they're Nana Suin, used to be the Hebrew god. That's the god of the desert for the desert people.
Now, Phil, what do you do? Well, let me ask it this way. Do you think our fundamental dichotomy between history and myth is flawed? And that what we're seeing is a much more colorful, much more complex, more multi-layered picture? What do you do when you have historians, or those that we think are historians, and they don't agree? They're all supposed to be writing history, but the details don't line up. I mean, for example, you look at Nero's biography. Tacitus wrote one, Suetonius wrote one, Cassius Dio wrote one. The details are all different. Josephus, Josephus, who's supposed to be a historian, is talking about a Passover where a heifer gives birth to a lamb. That's not history, dude. Why? Where do we get this idea that history somehow is clinical, neat, explainable? Is that wrong?
Okay, they had that, but they didn't use it for really important things. For instance, if you read the foundation stories, the 7 kings of Rome, you find out that that's all allegory. Okay, these 3 of them were priests, 3 were warriors, and they just happened to split that way. And then there's one that became, was both or something. And he would be the son leading the pantheon of the 7 gods. That's what they're really showing you. Okay, they use the same cosmogonical models over and over again. So you're going to see the planets more than you see anything, but you're also going to see the elements, okay, and you have to sort this. So you can go and look at the Barrosan theogony, or I would recommend the Herodian, because like my 3 sun gods that are one god are basically the dawn god, the golden god of the day, and then the high noon white god. And this is Esau and Jacob, or excuse me, it's Esau and the middle one's Helios. I forget who. Oh yeah, he's Elias, and he's Helios. Now look at the word. Okay, in Greeks don't put H on Helios. It's Elios. Now the Hebrew name is Elias. It's the difference is an A instead of an O in the name. And they show you that that's the golden one, that he's the middle one. Dr. Price identifies correctly as the Hyperion high god, the white god. The god in the middle is Helios or Elias, and he is golden. The son of the dawn and the dusk, sun on horizon, is red, and that's associated with Mars. And this is where you get into the who Ares actually, who Yahweh actually is, and how he was influenced by Ares, the god of war. Well, Cashapp actually, because it happened. Cashapp is the precursor. He's the Anatolian precursor to Ares. Sorry.
Okay, so the eclipse at Jesus' crucifixion, when he makes the remark as quoted in Mark, Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani.
Right.
My God, why hast thou forsaken me? But didn't the sun forsake him in the eclipse? The Eli reference, doesn't that seem to be
well,
a reference there?
El is who he is. He's God. Okay, you could call Elion, or whichever El of Babylon, the God of the Bible. But he's actually the father of the God of the Bible. Okay, he was Yahweh's father because he was Teshab's father in Anatolia, and
correct.
He's essentially Zeus's father, if you want to get sticky about it too. So it's
that's right.
Kumarbi. Now, when you shift over to Gilgamesh, Kumarbi is Humbaba, and he's Enlil's monster. Okay, but it's still pointing at Enlil, at El. So El means God. The names of the gods come from light and beauty. They come from light and beauty. Those are the 2 things they really, really believe in. Truth and beauty. ideal truth. That's the problem. We define truth as something you could test. You could scientifically test it, hopefully, right? And we understand it in that way. They understood truth as referring to the ideal, to that image in their mind of the perfect world where the God is ruling everybody and everybody is doing what the God wants. Or the gods, if you're polytheistic.
This is interesting because it kind of brought me back to a guest we had that was talking about pre-literate, societies and how they viewed truth, and it wasn't so black and white. The way we've gotten with our writing and the way that an oral thinker versus a literate thinker would think totally different, and it fits exactly what you're talking about here. So it almost sounds like what we're seeing is an oral traditional type of or an oral thinker mindset. But then again, there's some questions I have about that too, Luther, that I still have my questions into. I mean, if you go back and you still see the Epic of Gilgamesh as a literate society, they're writing. So, what's going on? So, question for you, Phil. What are your plans on getting this information out? How will accepting this truth, change things or change people's lives? Like, what will this truth do, if you don't mind? I know this is more of like a personal, but what did it do for you, or maybe what do you think it's going to do for people? And will this become a common thing, do you think? You think scholars will get off their high horse in some aspects and take a leap of faith and say, hey, let's test this thing?
Well, look, all you have to do is look at Simon Magus's girlfriend. She's Helen, okay? And she is beauty. Okay, and they don't separate beauty from truth. This is what I'm saying to you. They see truth as only existing in an ideal sense. They don't see it. They seem to define it differently, and so they're always trying to get this precious thing, and this precious thing is Helen of Troy, or it's the cedar wood, but it is always a rufous colored thing as they see it, is always related to her. Venus is considered Rufus. She is considered the fire of desire and passion and that sort of thing. Okay, so there are two kinds of fire. There's the kind that burns, and there's the kind on the outside, and the kind that burns on the inside. The love, the hope, because this is the spectrum between what you love and you hope, and what you hate and you fear.
Pretty serious discussion there, Phil. Let's talk about your show, New Skeptics. You are a man of many talents. I've seen the show. You have dressed like I don't know what you would call it, a zombie clown, sometimes a cyborg. Derek, I don't know if you've had a chance to check it out, man. And then he's an Orthodox bishop sometimes. He looks like an Eastern Orthodox bishop. You have a lot of fun doing that show, don't you?
Yeah, I've always put up a picture, pretty much. I used to go on camera before I lost my front tooth. Okay, and my lisp didn't used to be this bad. Okay, and so so I don't appear on camera for that reason. But probably before the book comes out, I'll have fresh teeth and that sort of thing. So. I'll be able to do public appearances and even entertain publicly and sing and play guitar and that sort of stuff. So, Luther, you're not even coming through, sir.
Okay. Oh, thank you, Phil. What kind of guitar do you play? How would you classify your music, if it's classifiable?
Well, I did send you, in fact, a link where I'm just doing a karaoke, but I can do that song on guitar. I do Green Day, I do Modern Soul, I like Collective Soul, and I like some various, because music that people could relate to. It's not like I'm trying to be a rock star or anything like that. I'm just trying to bring something extra to it that most people don't bring.
Yeah, you remind us of our good friend in Australia, Santos Bonacci, who's an accomplished guitarist, along with, of course, his accomplishments in astrotheology.
Okay.
Good work there. Derek, you wanna take us home?
Yeah,
we're about to wrap up here.
Yeah, man, I mean, my brain took a beating. There's a lot there that we talked about, and I feel like we're gonna have to come up with a whole nother round 2. And I think we kept Thanos off our backs, so I hear nothing but noise. Okay, there we go.
Okay, you know what might be a good idea? Perhaps you might want to put Jacob Berman and myself on a webcast, if you wouldn't mind. We've it's not like we're best buds or anything, but we could conceivably work together. We get part of the puzzle that nobody else gets. It's just he and I. I have literally no one else I could talk about the deep levels with. So he gets it. He knows who the players are, is what it is. He's going to present that Enyalius is the son of Mars, and that he influenced the Jesus character, and that Gibble influenced the character, and that sort of stuff. So that's what you're going to get. The gospel Jesus is influenced by that. That's where he's saying it. So here's what it is. If you want to read it from a Martian point of view, from a Roman point of view, you can. That's what I'm saying. You just as easily as you can see these New Testament documents from a Hebrew point of view, you could also see them from a Greek point of view, or especially the Greeks, because they use them. As you see, the name Elias, it's just Elios, which it would be in Greek.
That's cool.
That's how close they are. Or again, Tubal-Cain and Vulcan. That's how close they are because of the Proto-Indo-European.
Phil, how do people get a hold of you?
They don't.
Thanos, did you hear that? Stay away, man.
Mm-hmm.
Stay away.
No, but that's true. If you can't reach me in an email, you're never going to talk to me. I don't keep a phone unless I want it, like it's got a cool camera or something. So that's just how I am. If I need to make a call, I use one of these contraptions here.
I tell you what, if you guys can't get a hold of him anyway, you can comment on his videos on his YouTube channel. Make sure you check that out. It's in the description of this video. Be sure to check this out. We got to have you back on, Phil. So we'll have to schedule and have another show set up. Send us who this gentleman is that you and him work really well together, and me and Luther will conspire, if you will, to come up with a good show.
That sounds great. In fact, I talked to him today, so this will be fine. I'll get right back to him. And I just want to say that it's called Skeptics with Phil Robinson is the name of the channel. But my co-host is Edwin Herbert, and his name will make its way back on the channel one of these days. Okay, so I want to thank you guys very much for putting this on, as this will make it a lot easier for me to proceed. I at least have a basis, something I can show people. That's been my problem, is I am always the interviewer and never the interviewee.
You're great.
Right. And Phil, I love the show. I was sharing with Derek before the taping how you get things out of your guests that I've never seen pulled out of them before. These are guys that, we've seen Price and Carrier and Fitzgerald, but you come at them from a different angle, and you're able to mine things from them that I've never seen anybody else do. So continued good luck with the show, and looking forward to great things from Skeptics with Phil Robinson. All right. So, Derek, time to wrap up, I guess. Thanks for being with us, Phil.
Yeah, thank you, Phil. I appreciate it, brother. If you guys like what you're hearing, like I said, check out the description. And we've got our Patreon, PayPal. Luther has articles and some really interesting stuff with gematria and how he's connecting a lot of dots. You guys, there's some good stuff coming that Luther's going to do. I can't tell nobody, not even Thanos. So, I'm excited to see where that goes, because this thing hits so many things, dude. Phil really, really jacked my head up with some of that stuff. I was like, hold on, I'm lost. Oh, I'm back. It was deep. It was deep.